Good morning, everyone. This is David Owen with Changescape Web, and welcome to this episode of the Real Producers Podcast. I'm joined this morning by William Hess of WH Appraisals. Today, we'll learn more about his company and find out why appraisals are important. Welcome, William, or do you go by Bill?
I go by Bill.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your company.
I started in about 2008. I got into the industry right after the market crashed, which was actually probably not the best time to get into the industry. But my dad is an appraiser, and so I trained with him. And then I worked for a few other appraisal companies, getting my license. And then after I got my license, I worked for a couple other appraisal companies. And then after a couple years, I had enough of my own clients to just go out on my own. And so I've been on my own for the past 10 years or so.
Oh, wow. Okay. You don't look old enough to have done this for 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I've always looked very young for my age. So now I'm at the point where I can start to appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great.
I didn't like it so much when I was younger, though.
Yeah, I understand. Until you get a little gray hair, everybody thinks you're young.
Yeah.
So tell us what is an appraisal?
So an appraisal is basically just an appraiser's opinion of the market value of a home, essentially what you think a home is worth. And there's numerous reasons why an appraisal is needed and why they're used, but it's mostly so that lenders can essentially make a determination on if they want to give you a loan or not.
So they use your evaluation of value as one piece of knowledge on whether to give you a loan.
Yeah, pretty much for the most part. Yeah, it's a lender or an investor's tool for them to establish if essentially if they want to not if they want to give you the loan, but it's just a tool to establish how much they think the loan is worth.
Okay. So how long, you said you've been doing this for quite a while. How many people do you have working with you? How big is your company? That kind of thing.
So right now it's just me, and then I have another person who works for me. He's currently a trainee, which means that he's training to become a supervisor or to become an appraiser. In order to become an appraiser, you have to work underneath a supervisor, and you have to take several appraisal classes. And then you also have to accumulate so many appraisal experience hours.
Okay. So it's kind of like they're your student in a way, your employee, but also your student as they're learning the business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You basically teach them everything that you know so that when they get their license that they're ready to go and appraise homes on their own.
Okay. And that's pretty standard in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, every state within the country requires a certification in order to be an appraiser, and in order to do appraisals, does require certification. I think each state's a little bit different on how many hours you have to take. Some of the appraisal classes maybe a little bit, but it's fairly standardized process across every state within the country.
So is it required? Is an appraisal required, or do banks want you to have one, won't loan you money without one?
Um, I, that's more of a question for a lender as to why they're required or what they're used for, that kind of stuff. But typically speaking, they're only willing to lend the amount that the appraisal comes in for. So whatever the appraised value is, that's typically the number they use to determine the loan amount.
So how does the market affect that? Does it affect your appraisal, or is yours kind of a, I'm just looking at this house, this is what it's worth, and the market can do what it wants?
So yeah, I mean the market essentially determines the value of a home because the home value is based upon home sales. So when the market is doing good and values are going up, typically that would mean that appraised values are also going up. Something that's going on right now that makes appraisals very challenging is the current market condition, which is that there's very, very little inventory. So buyers are essentially fighting over houses.
Mm-hmm.
And if a home is properly marketed at a right price that garners a bunch of interest, what's happening is the buyers are submitting multiple offers and doing escalation clauses and things like that. And essentially the home is selling for a lot more than the list price. And in many cases, it's selling for a lot more than what you can even appraise it for because the market can't keep up with the current demand.
So, how does that affect the buyer? I mean, let's say they get a house. I just had a friend of mine had that situation. He was a seller, and the buyer bought above what they priced it at. And I'm assuming he did some research, look at houses in the area, that kind of thing. How do banks handle that? Do they just deny the loan, or do they say they're only going to loan so much based on the appraised value, or how does that work?
Yeah, lending gets very complicated. I mean, that's why it's its own industry. But some of these questions are better answered by a lender.
Okay.
Uh, Typically, it just opens up negotiations. Essentially, the lender and the borrower, they look at the appraisal, and the lender explains, we can only give you a loan for this amount, whatever. A lot of times buyers will just have to come up with cash out of their pocket to pay the difference, or they'll renegotiate with the seller and maybe change the sale price. So there's so many different options that all it really does is just open up negotiations for what needs to be done in order to make the sale go through.
Okay.
That's up to the buyer, the seller, and the lender to determine that.
So then the point I got out of that is it opens negotiations, which some people might say, well, that's a bad thing. Others say that's what we wanted, is to try and negotiate this deal. So, um, so what goes into an appraisal? What is the components that make up an appraisal?
Yeah. So the first thing you do is you look at the property and you just and perform a basic inspection, and you just take notes on the type of flooring, the type of windows, all the various physical characteristics of the home. You'll take pictures, measure the home, see how big it is. And then the next part of the process is actually working on the appraisal report, which the first page is a lot of like data entry, physical characteristics of the home, a lot of the notes that you took during your inspection. You'll put that to paper in the report. And then the last step is to find comparable sales, find homes that you feel are comparable, and then make adjustments for the differences between the two properties, and then ultimately determine an appraised value based upon the comparable sales and the adjustments that you made to the comparables.
Okay.
And the finished product is a report that basically outlines what you think the home is worth and your conclusions.
So who pays for the appraisal?
The borrower does normally. I guess in some cases the lender may pay for it, but typically it's the borrower who pays for the appraisal.
And then when is that paid for? Is it paid for at closing or before that?
It's between the borrower and the lender, but normally before closing, but it just depends. It's something that's on the closing statement, so it typically is paid by closing.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, you've kind of described how this works, and I've inferred why you need an appraisal. It's to kind of protect the lender or the borrower and the person buying the house, I would guess.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So, how do you talked about comparable comps? How are those determined?
It's a case by case basis, and there's several factors. Some of the factors are location. Obviously, you want homes that are located near the subject because location is one of the most important determinants of value. Um, other other things would be physical characteristics, homes that are similar in design, similar in size, similar in condition. So with you being the appraiser, that's your job to determine what is comparable, and it's up to you to make that determination, but it does have to be rational and logical, and it has to make sense. But you have a lot of leeway in what you can do. You can do almost anything as long as you can explain why you did it, and it's an explanation that makes logical sense.
So, yeah, it has to have some rationale behind it. You just can't be willy-nilly about what you're doing.
Yeah, and it depends. I mean, if you're in like St. Louis City County, okay, you're gonna have 100 sales of homes that are very similar. But then if you're in like a rural part of Jefferson County and you're on a home with 3 or 4 acres, well, you're not gonna have 100 sales within a mile. You're gonna have 5 or 10 sales within a mile.
Right.
So in those situations, typically like the more complicated the home is, the less reliable the comparable sales are going to be.
Okay.
So that's just why everything's a case by case basis as to what is considered comparable.
All right. So that's good on the comps. I often wondered that. How do you figure that out? Do you take into account how the county or the state would appraise the value from a tax perspective?
No, I don't. I mean, you have, the county, they come up with an assessed value, and they also come up with an appraised value, which those values are used to establish how much you pay in taxes. But those, I believe, typically those are done through statistical valuation models, which sometimes they can be accurate, but I would say most of the time they're probably not accurate. They would be very similar to a value that Zillow says your home is worth. They're based upon math, and so they can be somewhat reliable, but generally speaking, the more complicated the house is, the less reliable they would be. So it just
Sure.
depends. Like I said, they can be accurate, but usually they're not going to be like as accurate as an actual appraisal.
Okay. Okay. So how do you get business? How do people find you?
Typically, they'll reach out to you a lot of times. All of appraisers' information is on the Missouri Appraiser Commission website. So I think what happens a lot of times is when lenders go to create an appraiser panel, um, they'll get like emails and appraiser lists from either the state of Missouri or somebody else, and a lot of times they'll just reach out to you. A lot of the lenders I have are through networking, people that I know that I'm an appraiser and decided to add me. There's a lot of what they call appraisal management companies where you can pretty much just go to their website and then sign up and join their panel. So it's a little bit of everything. As far as like how you pick up your clients.
Okay. What is there a part of the greater St. Louis area you prefer to work in or maybe specialize in?
No, not really. I cover not only Missouri, but I cover 3 counties in Illinois. So my total coverage area is a total of like 9 counties.
Okay.
But no, there's not one that I prefer more than the other. Probably whichever one is closest to the office, because then that means it's less driving.
Sure.
So, but I enjoy appraising any type of property. So, yeah, I don't have a particular coverage area that I like more than the other.
Okay. So do you have, where is your office, by the way?
My office is in Fenton.
Okay.
I just work out of my house.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
that's what's easiest.
No, I
And
understand. I do too. I do as well. So
doesn't make sense to drive 30 minutes to an office every day.
that's right. When you can do the same work at home.
Exactly.
So I understand. Let's see. What other things are important and you need to pay attention to? Does the buyer or the seller have a choice of appraisers?
The seller definitely not. They really have nothing to do with the appraisal. The appraisal is strictly for the borrower and the borrower's lender. They're the only 2 parties that use the appraisal. I mean, the buyers negotiate with it, but it's not for the seller.
Okay.
But no, they don't get to choose the appraiser. It's supposed to all be randomized. Basically, a lender has an appraiser panel, and then when an appraisal is needed, it's randomly assigned to one of the appraisers on their panel. So that's how it's supposed to be. I guess it is possible for certain lenders to choose their appraisers, but as far as the legalities behind that, I'm not aware of. That would be a question for a lender.
So that's that. Theoretically, they choose from the panel and they just throw it, for lack of a better term, throw a dart at a dartboard to pick someone.
Yeah, it'll all be randomized. A lot of the websites that lenders order appraisals through, they automatically randomize it. Or if a lender is using an appraisal management company, then the management company essentially does the assigning of the appraisal order.
Okay. All right. So in your case, if you got an appraisal order at your company, you would, as a learning experience, take the person that you've hired as a trainee and get them experience, maybe do that together?
That's how we started out. We started out doing them together because I had to show him how to do an inspection, like the way I do it, and to teach him all the various things. But now he's done enough inspections on his own that he's qualified to do them on his own. So typically he just goes by himself.
Okay. Okay.
Unless if it's something that I need to be there for, then I'll usually just do the inspection on my own.
So I've heard the term drive-by inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, there is a such thing as what they call an exterior appraisal, where you don't go inside, you just view it from the outside, and you just have to assume all the interior information. Usually you can like have a discussion with the homeowner, or there's prior MLS listings where you can get you can be sure that most of the information is accurate.
Okay.
You have to guess and assume on some things. So they do those, and then they've recently made this push towards what they call hybrid appraisals, where it's kind of the same thing as a exterior. In some cases, you don't even go see the property from the outside. You just rely on all the information that's readily available to you to determine a value just based upon data, essentially.
Okay. So do you ever use Google? You know?
Yeah, I use Google Maps
Yeah.
for quite a bit of neighborhood analysis, identifying neighborhoods, that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't have any other questions. I feel like I have a better idea of how you do this. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing?
Um, no. I mean, I think we pretty much covered the basics. Obviously is a lot more to talk about, but as far as the basics go, I think we did a pretty good job covering, the basic stuff, how to get into the industry, what is an appraisal, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Sure. All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate your time, and we'll go for now.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye.